Welcome, everyone, to Beyond the Case, which is a podcast where global leaders from Harvard Business School's OPM community join in a personal capacity. They talk about real decisions, failures, mental models that go behind building enduring companies. Guest today is one of the most loved persons from my OPM batch, Filippo Ghirelli. Hey, Filippo, how are you?
Thank you. How are you, Sohin? All good?
Doing very well. Filippo, do you have a moment to introduce yourself and tell us about what you do?
Yes. So I am, I would say, serial founder of infrastructure companies, mostly related towards initially, I would say, to energy and construction, and later developed into key strategic and systemic infrastructure systems, such as aviation, transportation infrastructure, space, decentralized AI, energy, and of course, we still do a lot of real estate. So these are my five, I would say, most investable and invested systems, which we do through a company called InfraCorp, which is a global developer of these projects.
What inspired you to create InfraCorp?
Well, the inspiration is mostly driven by the fact that I've had a lot of experiences around the world with governments and private stakeholders, investors, never really finding the projects the way they wanted them to be. A project, in order for it to be investable, has to be properly assessed, properly de-risked, and I would say with a overall geostrategic view. And this is the reason why within InfraCorp we've created InfraCore, which is a 7-layer AI system that allows us to create the full digital twin of our investment, of our infrastructure, and how that infrastructure is going to be behaving locally, nationally, globally. What's the economic impact, the financial impact, the social impact, the environmental impact, and how basically by moving a series of levers, how the infrastructure is going to change, how it's going to change its impact in all of these fields. So it's very, very important to consider that, especially when you're looking at larger and larger infrastructure that these countries needs, So it's a thorough journey that really never ends because it's a continuous change. Given the international situations, it's a continuous change that happens. So imagine if you were to build a huge water container, water tank in Ukraine before the war, which was being used for maybe cattle or for crops or for whatever. Think about how that water tank would change after the war. What's the value of that? So these are the kind of things that we're looking at, how how these infrastructure are impacted by changes around the world, both locally and nationally, of course.
Wow. Filippo, you've shared with us at OPM that you went to MIT. How did your time at MIT influence your way of thinking?
Yeah, I was involved in this fantastic exchange program that my university, the Italian University in Rome, did at the time. So I was very pleased to be able to attend. I did basically all my thesis at MIT. That time was extremely interesting, but at the same time, the inspiration was not still part of me. I was still an engineering student. I was 21, if I recall, and so to be extremely honest, the level of inspiration that I receive now is the total, I would say, sensitivity to these kinds of, I would say, processes, growth processes, are much more sensitive now than what they were at the time. At the time, I was a very good student, but at the same time, did not have all the, I would say, the receptors that were open to new things. So it was absolutely a fantastic experience. But if I were to define it in a thorough and philosophical way, I would say the impact was 30% of its potential. Whereas if I were to do it now, it probably hit me like a 95%.
Once you got out of school, did you work anywhere at first or did you start your own business right away?
No, I started working for a large construction firm, global. So I worked in Africa for 2 years, several countries. I worked in Turkey. Then I went back to Italy to work on high-speed trains. Then I was hired as a general manager. I was 27 for a prominent real estate developer and clinics operator up until I was 29. And when I was 29, I was proposed to get for free 5% of the shares of this group. I was like very blessed. But after I signed, the week after, actually 10 days after, mentor, then the sole shareholder, died in a car accident. I would say I had some major internal fights, of course, because I was appointed these shares, and then the negotiation that I had, which was quite okay at the end, I was able not to get money but to get projects. So I took projects out of this company and I founded my own construction company, which then later expanded into Italy, Northern Africa, which was a great experience, to be honest. That's how I started.
So, how do you process setbacks like the one you mentioned right now? And how has that changed over the years?
When you are at the beginning, the setbacks are relevant. At the same time, they don't happen with a certain frequency. The more you do, the more you have setbacks, because the setbacks are proportional to the type of activity that you do. The more you activate yourself, the more it's you have the probability to have setbacks. So the way I took it at the very beginning was with panic, because when you're at the beginning, when you're 30, 29, 30, I'm 45 right now. I was born in 1980. When I started my own group, I was 29. So at the time, it was fairly early. I mean, 29 today would be like you're already old. But at the time, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, it was a much different situation. When you were 29, you were young to start your own company. In reality, the first setbacks were when basically people wouldn't pay you, or when you had to cover a debt that you were not able to cover, or there were contracts that were clients would withdraw from. So these were all very highly impactful things. At the time, for me, it was panic. Totally. I could not handle the situations. Then I slowly understood how to become what I call a third party to yourself.
Mhm.
And being a third party to yourself means that you are here, the problem is there, and there is absolutely no problem that can be solved if you strongly believe that your thesis is the thesis that's a winning thesis, and you elaborate a proper reaction to the. So that's why I say a third party. So I extrapolate myself from the discussion and I see myself from the outside. And then at that point, once I freeze the problem, I start breaking up the problem in pieces. So the elaboration of crisis and crisis management, I've gone through so many times, especially when I was in Egypt. You have to understand, Sohin, that when I was 32, I did an enormous amount of sales in Morocco, and I decided to reinvest, I think over $20 million in practically all the money that I had made during that time. I decided to reinvest in Egypt, another big mall to build, but in that time as a developer. So I would own the land, co-own the land with local players and so on and so forth. But then in 2013, Arab Spring came.
Mhm.
The consequences of this, of course, I cannot tell you everything because, of course, there's still a trial going on after, already 12 years. But I was taken everything. I lost everything. So when you lose all your money, you lose your construction company, you lose your real estate company, they freeze your accounts, they take everything from you. What do you do? So I went back to my country, to Italy, and I restarted from scratch in the renewable business. Which then became Genera Group from the way it is right now, which is one of the major sustainability companies in Europe. But at that time, I would wake up. I still remember it. I would wake up in the summer at 5 o'clock in the morning, and it felt cold. So I was cold with 37 degrees Celsius outside. I would basically cry for a good 15 minutes. I would turn on the hairdryer just to keep a sound to cover my sadness. But then I stopped doing that. I turn everything off. Says, okay, you cried. I would say your emotions have come out. You've kicked out all your bad feelings. Let's start again. At 6, I would then, dress up, go out, and start fighting again. So that's how it was. And this more and more, this is happening on a third party basis. Again, extrapolating yourself. And right now, every problem that there is, people come to me all the time and say, oh, we have this incredible, unsustainable problem that cannot be solved, blah, blah, blah. And I always say, okay, let's face the problem. Let's see what the problem is. And normally, whenever the thesis is credible, and whenever you can play around with the situations, with the opportunities, and then you can make the decision maker, the one that can appear to the others as the cool guy. We've learned this, I think, a couple of times in our journey. How to make your customer a hero, but it's not only the customer; it's also your counterparty. I mean, whenever the counterparty feels that you found a solution not only for yourself but also for him or for her, uh, they're yours. Normally, they will follow exactly because they don't want problems. Because the moment they create you problems and you have an issue with them, you can always point at them as the problem maker. Troublemaking has to be paired with troubleshooting and problem solving. Very important.
Thank you for sharing that. I felt always that more than being a brilliant person that we all know you are, you're more so a philosopher as well. The way you contextualize things and the way you mentioned right now about taking yourself out of the problem, looking at it from a third person's perspective was brilliant. So thank you for sharing that. When you look back at these moments, what do you feel you learned about yourself when you had everything at risk?
I would say that let me give you a bit of context here, because learning is always, you're always learning. Learning, I assign a value to learning, which is the same thing as the change of energy. Many people say that it's totally wrong to, I mean, physicists, for instance, they say it's totally pointless to understand how much energy you own, because the energy you own doesn't make sense. Because if this pen drops from this height up to this height, there's a certain potential energy. But all of a sudden, if this pen stays here and what's below goes all the way down, there's a higher potential energy. So you increase the distance, the potential energy increases. So in reality, it doesn't make sense to talk about how much energy you've gained, so how much you've learned, but it's the change that derives from that learning. And that's what's very important. It's not important how much you've learned, it's the change of energy, the change in attitude that learning creates on you. And the same thing applies to physics. It's the change of energy. It's not how much energy you have. It's very important to always relativize things. What I always say to myself is that the more I learn, the more I'm capable of changing the skills through which I solve problems. It's not an amount that sort of stacks up that gives you what you are, but that stuck is basically the change that's on you when you solve the problems. It's a totally different view. And this is driven also by learning from the experiences of others. Many of the things that we learn come from direct life. This is extremely inefficient because there's enormous amounts of stories around the world that are essentially on books. The more you read, the more you go through everybody's passions, problems, emotions, feelings, and through their stories, you can really capitalize on how the learning curve can be better. So if I read about how a person has gone through love or has gone through problems of work, problems with fathers and mothers and families and colleagues, if I learn how others see it from their perspective, I can also figure out a different perspective. Because as you know, information is never real or fake. Information is the instruments through which you make people do things, because information is never true. Information is credible, may be credible. And the level of credibility of the information is the level of, the more it's credible, the more people rely on it, and the more people then act consequently. So learning is exactly that process. A credible learning is the learning that makes you save time when you make decisions. This is the whole story. And how your learning makes other people solve your problem when you have it. So it's not really a stack of information, it's more the elaboration of that information, how that information changes the way you act towards problems.
We did this case with John Osher, and he had this checklist or these principles that he aggregated as he built multiple businesses. You've diversified so well. What are some of the principles or insights that you carry forward with you, given everything you've been through in life?
I never like to give things too general. When you said diversification, think that diversification is a compliment. In reality, diversification is how you increase your risk without wanting to increase your risk. But what I've been doing so far, I have not really been diversifying. I've been, I would say, differentiating the offer. So by covering many infrastructure businesses, the diversification is maybe on the portfolio, but the rationale is the same. The lesson learned from the past is that when I diversified in things that were not coherent with one another, I always lost money and I always lost a lot of time. I would say mostly lost a lot of time, because then in the end, I was able to sort of get my money back and get partially my money. But in reality, the big mistakes that I made when I diversified was when I diversified in things that I didn't know anything about. You start a business without knowing everything, but it's good that you invest as you progress in the concentration of your knowledge. And even on the businesses that I knew a lot about, I lost a lot of money in Egypt because I totally misinterpreted the science of geostrategy, which is now a fundamental part of my business. The lesson learned is when you diversify on things that you know about. And when you don't know about, you get the maximum specialist. And when you get the maximum specialist, you really focus on what they can give you first, and then you make the further steps.
I've heard from your living group that you've shared with them you would have wanted to be maybe a singer or a musician at some point. How did creativity shape your identity in the early stages of your life?
It's all about creativity. Technique is just a very small complementary part of my life, but that really happens to everybody. Everybody who's done something in life has put an enormous dose of creativity. Creativity is generated in many ways. It can be generated because you teach yourself how to educate it. Someone teaches you creativity. You have innate situation, or maybe you are in need. You need to be creative to get out of a problem. I would say that in most of my life, creativity was something that came straightforward from my reading experiences. I read a lot, and reading gives you not only, I would say, the concepts of how creativity works, but also give you the words to describe it. If you don't have a proper vocab, you cannot even think of a concept. If you think about it for a moment, how can you describe anything you don't know the word for? It's impossible. This is the main reason why most of the let's say generalist and superficial people that you see around are basing themselves on. They may get enormous amounts of money, but still live a miserable life. You can get enormous amounts of money, but then everything rotates around you. But then you have a very limited amount of feelings, because feelings are different. Feelings, you can educate them, but emotions, you can't educate them. Most of the people that gain a lot of money without having a deep understanding of themselves, they can only exploit a small part of their emotions. They only exploit the emotions. They don't exploit the feelings, because the emotions are the things that give you adrenaline, that give you pleasure, that give you this. Of course, with a lot of money, you can drive beautiful cars, you can have fantastic trips. But if you do not know yourself, there's a bottom part that you will always forget. If you don't know how to treat spirituality, you will never be able to observe silence. If you have never trained your vocab, you will never know how to describe something that hits you. It's important because this era is an era where everything is measured by technique. Everything is measured in numbers. And the moment you stop measuring in numbers, but measuring in accomplishments, but not economic accomplishments, but what you have learned, what you've done, then most of the people have a problem. Because the only valuation that's there for them, and this is mostly given by the Western culture, driven by numbers. The moment you insert other things in your life, and the basket is much bigger, then the whole world changes. This is the reason why I'm saying to all the people that we hire, we don't want engineers anymore. Humanists. We want people with history, social sciences, politics behind themselves. It's enough of engineering. I'm an engineer, and it's enough of me as well. So that's what we want.
What role does humor play in your leadership style?
Humor is it's huge. It's big time. Irony and humor are very different things, to be honest. Some people make them coincide, but humor and the way you interpret life and interpret other people's lives is the key factor. Of course, it's not always appreciated by people, because I'm a big irony guy. I tend to make fun of myself a lot, and I tend to make fun of other people a lot. A lot of the people don't understand that when you make fun of them, you're not hurting them. You are trying to show them a side that they don't know about. And people that get hit by these things, they feel uncomfortable with being fooled. You understand that these are the kind of people that in most cases have had a an extremely superficial learning curve. The moment you get perturbated by a joke, it means that you've never looked at yourself. Of course, you don't have to be hard on people. Being hard is not what I like. But I love making fun, because making fun gives you another side, explores another side of you. And in the end, what do we want for us? What do we want for our families? Do you want to be happy and joyful, or do you want to be always serious? Think about when you go home. Do you play with your kids, or you go like this with your kids? You play with your kids. So everybody in reality wants that, but the moment that you show that side to other people, you feel weak. And actually, if you feel offended, you feel even weaker, because it means that you were hit. If instead somebody comes to you and does a joke about you, and you laugh about it, and you say, oh yes, it's way worse than that, you feel comfortable with yourself, and you feel much stronger in front of people. Make people understand how you play with that defect that you have, and how you absorb it within your personality.
Absolutely.
So it's very important.
What made you apply to OPM 67?
I have no clue. I just felt attracted by a community of high standard people. I don't mean high achievement in terms of finance, because of course you will always find people that I've only achieved money. But I think getting together with 150 fantastic human beings for 3 weeks, oh my God, I could have never lost that. It's like studying communities for me is like the most important and most vital element in life, nothing else. So yeah, learning, of course, learning a bit more about markets, about stuff. But in general, the whole idea of OPM for me was to submerge and immerse myself into stories, which I really love.
And were there any takeaways that you found yourself applying once you were done with the first unit?
There's thousands of details that came out of these 3 weeks, and I think the details that the most came out were I would say the barriers that people have around the world, towards the world, and how they are willing to I would say demolish those barriers when everybody else does the same. So I've noticed so many people that at the beginning were having a hard time speaking English. After 3 weeks, they would raise their hand every 5 seconds. And the reason was that it's not that they did not speak English and that they learned it in 3 weeks, but they just didn't know that English was just a barrier. And the moment that there's other people that, destroy their barriers, they feel comfortable in doing the same. So the moment that a person starts speaking up, or the moment that a person explores him or herself through defeats rather than only showing, oh, I'm bum, 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 So I mean, it's super important to be cool on Instagram. Instagram is just face A. You have a face B, face C, face D, face J. And these are the kind of faces that I love to see.
Man, you are so real. I can totally sense that I'm talking to someone who's lost it all, figured out what really matters in life, and then reprioritize. So I appreciate this conversation so much.
This is something that is still going on. It's not done yet. There's still a process. Talking good does not mean that you apply everything you say, but that's what I'm trying to do.
You've mentioned twice in this conversation about the importance of reading, and how you're such an avid reader. Any book that has influenced you?
To be honest, I cannot. This is not an answer I can give you straight away. There are some key books that really matter to me, but what I always try to do is get out of every book a piece of reality. Again, perceived reality, which does not mean real reality. And I try to build my library, let me put it this way, my internal library as a DNA. As you know, DNA is not a fixed thing. It evolves, it changes. So in reality, a book that might have hit me very much 5 years ago, if I were to reread it now, it wouldn't hit me at all. And this is all part of the same game, because we are elements that change continuously. I mean, after 3 weeks in OPM, am I the same person as before? No, of course not. I changed some pieces. Some have been radically changed. Some have not changed. Some has changed a little. So whenever people ask me, what was a book that really changed your life? None. They all changed my life. in reality, if I can tell you, do I like more fiction or do I like more, I would say, documentary? Do I like more people that talk about things? Before I was a big fiction reader, big, what in Italian we call narrative. Okay. So stories. Okay. I love stories. Right now, I read a lot more, people that talk about, specific things. I like to see their point of view on how they see the world. Do I keep reading stories? I do. Not to the same level as before. And I have a deep love for philosophy. And, I don't read a philosopher just because everybody reads it, but because it stabs me positively, of course, when I read it. Do I buy art because of the price, of the value? Sometimes, but in most cases, when I look at something and I really like it, even if it costs, $500, I like it, I buy it. It really depends on how it hits me. Books, I would say, all of the philosophy from Greece, which still remains the most, I would say, civilization that ever existed on this planet. In terms of the Western world, of course, I would never ever dare to hit Asian philosophy in any shape or form because I love it too much. But for the Western world, I think that Greek philosophers, I would say the basic ones, Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, and also the ones that really changed my life were Parmenas. These are the ones that really changed my way of looking at things. And then all the modern ones, the contemporary ones, Popper, Karl Popper, Heidegger, Hegel. Hegel is a bit of a problem somehow for Europe because it originated many of the turbulences that we had for as far as communist is concerned. But in general, philosophers that tried to disrupt in a super hard way the standard thinking. Literature, I'm so in love with Oscar Wilde, although he's not Italian. And of course, the Dante for me is like Dante Alighieri for me is like the most important reference to Divine Comedy for me is like the book that really changed the approach on how I look at things. But then there's tons of beautiful books that are right now available. I think there's too many, to be honest. There's too many books of people that go around and say, oh, I give you the 10 rules for success. I give you the 100 rules of how to conquer a woman. This I tend not to read. All the gurus that want to teach how to live your life is, for me, is bullshit.
If you pick up a book, do you try to finish it, or do you try to just absorb what you want to and go like, I'm done with what I had to, I don't need to finish the book?
There are some books that I did not finish. Absolutely. And I did not finish on purpose. Absolutely. Yeah. Some books were extremely boring. I can tell you, for instance, the Ulysses, was one of the most boring books. Another the Ulysses of James Joyce, Mr. James Joyce, the writer. I found that one of the most boring books in the world, and I read 30% of it. I took what I wanted to pick, which was style, storytelling, and so on and so forth. But then I was like, enough. And not because of the length. I mean, I've read thousands and thousands of pages, but it's mostly related to how good the user experience is.
If you could speak to your younger self today, the dreamer, the artist, what would you tell him?
Being an artist is what I really wanted. I was not able to do it because I was heavily opposed by my family at the time. But it was my fault. Again, why did artists succeed? Because they really wanted to. And if you want, you can always find ways to do it. So my suggestion is not only to choose what you want to be, but also to choose what you do not want to be. So that's for me a key factor. Knowing what you do not want to be is, I think, even more important than what you want to be. Because what you want to be is going to change all the time. Because today you're X, tomorrow you're Y, tomorrow you're Z. But choosing what you do not want to be is for life.
What would you tell anyone who's looking to start a company today or be an entrepreneur?
Good luck. It's probably the question that I've been asked so many times, and there's really no answer to that. Because starting a company, there's no manual to start a company. There's a manual for, potentially identify if a good idea is a sustainable idea. What I always say to those who launch companies is that the business idea is probably 1% of your business. All the rest is execution. So those who start anything, apart from the ritual, I would say, analysis of market and if that's a sustainable thing, if you're a game changer, if you really change the perception of that market. If that market doesn't work, you can change it. Apart from that you can read in every single book, I would say fix yourself the idea in your mind that the idea is nothing.
Thank you, Filippo. You've been very, very real and honest, and there's so many takeaways here. So I do appreciate your time. Thank you for participating.
Thank you so much.
All right. Be well.
Sorry, thank you so much.